Here we go.
So Renee, you're going to record rather than me. Okay. Hey, everybody. My name is Brian Jennings, and I'd like to welcome you to the Create to Learn webinar, which is sponsored by the Media Education Lab at the Harrington School of Communications and Media at URI, the University of Rhode Island. Today, we're welcoming Frank Romanelli and Carolyn Fortuna, who will be leading the discussion of Create to Learn and how people have been using it in the classroom. So would you two mind just introducing yourselves?
Not at all. Hello, everybody. I'm Carolyn Fortuna, and I'm here in Chepachet, Rhode Island, out in the countryside. And I am an adjunct faculty member at Rhode Island College in Providence, and I have piloted the Create to Learn book with my undergraduate middle school pre-service teachers. And I'm looking forward to sharing the results of that with you.
And how about you, Frank?
Sorry, I'm getting a little hung up once in a while, so if I'm slow to answer. I'm Frank Romanelli. I'm at the University of Rhode Island, Writing and Rhetoric Department. I am also the Early Credit High School Coordinator for Writing and Rhetoric in the in our concurrent enrollment program. I am my second semester working with Create to Learn in our digital writing and rhetoric class, Writing 235. And it's an undergraduate course that is required of majors, but also open enrollment. So I get about a 50-50 population. Last semester was a hybrid class, so I got to meet them live once a week. This semester is an online class. It's a little different. And then this summer I'll be using it a third time with an online class. So.
Okay, awesome. And who else are we here with?
I also see Bridget Dalton, and Bridget, you were going to talk to us in January when we originally planned this webinar. Can you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. I'm Bridget Dalton. I'm an associate professor in literacy studies at University of Colorado Boulder, and this semester I've been using the Create to Learn book and website resources with a master's class in digital literacies. And what's been, I think, particularly exciting about the work is that it's located at a local elementary school. And so 1 hour of the class is a hands-on workshop with 4th and 5th graders, where we're engaging them in different kinds of media tasks and production while the teachers, students who are also developing. So it's been a great experience.
Wow, what a great project. Okay, so I'll introduce myself next. I'm Renee Hobbs. I'm the author of Create to Learn. I'm also teaching with it for the first time in a fully online class called Digital Authorship. It's got 18 students who are enrolled in the Graduate Certificate in Digital Literacy. I wish we could be in an elementary school like Bridget is, 1 hour a week or whatever that is. That seems like a cool model. Instead, we have a synchronous video using this technology, Zoom, once a week, but otherwise students are basically involved in some partnerships and independent learning. They just finished creating a digital story, which for many of them was their first time creating a podcast or a screencast as a digital story. So I'm eager to share experiences about using the Create to Learn book, using that Create to Learn pedagogies. Who else is here in the room with us?
Charlie Coiro and Jody Alves, two favorites of mine.
Can you guys introduce yourselves to us, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is John Rubin. I am with Rhode Island PBS in the education department here. New to the station, about 3 months in. New to Rhode Island as well. My wife works in another part of URI, so that's what prompted our move here. But I've worked in public media for a long time in education, developing educational resources, primarily video-based, but all delivered free of charge, online, on demand. So I'm just starting to make connections, and this is one of them. And I look forward to learning more and staying in touch with everybody.
Hi, I'm Jody Alves. You can't see my picture because I don't know how to do that, and I'm not going to waste time on it now. But I can see all of you, so that's really nice. I'm a longtime proposal writer, senior proposal writer specialist at IGT, which is in Providence, Rhode Island. We do systems and run most of the lotteries in the world. No, I don't have any lucky numbers. And I also co-instruct a class on proposal writing at the University of Rhode Island. Currently, it's Writing and Rhetoric 388. And we do a full semester on teaching students how to write proposals and also how to develop the kind of marketable skills that it takes to do proposal development and send them out in the world with those skills.
Hi, I'm Charlie Quero with the Summer Institute in Digital Literacy. I'm a big fan of Renee's, and I'm just trying to get some exposure to what's going on.
Charlie, are you the Charlie of Julie Quero?
I am Julie's better half, some would say.
All right. Julie and I were just in Washington about a week or so ago.
I definitely recognize your name, Bridget.
So Lacey and Jen, will you introduce yourselves to us?
You need to turn on your mic.
We're not hearing you, Lacey.
She was. We were hearing her a while back, but now it's not working. Let's try again, Lacey.
Can barely hear you, like it's there, but it's not.
Oh, darn. All right, Jen, I guess we'll move to you. Jen, can you hear me? I see Jen.
I lost Jen. She might have got knocked off.
Dropped out.
Okay, so maybe we should get started. Brian, what's the plan? Who's going to go first?
Figure we could start with Frank, and then we'll finish up with Caroline. That sounds
all right.
Everybody else, anyway.
Sure.
All right. Is it okay if I do some screen sharing?
Sure.
I did bring up some links. So let me go to, let's see. So I'll start here with some of the ideas. Let's see. Where am I here? Here we go. Let me bring up the book. And can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, great. So my Writing 235 class is one of my favorite classes to teach. Has been in place for a few years, actually, since I started teaching at URI. And when this book came out, I saw a good connection to kind of the ideas around the projects that we develop in writing, what presently called writing electronic environments, but we're referring to it more and more as digital writing and rhetoric now. And looking at this book as a way to introduce students to digital writing as part of digital literacy, and also because it's a book that's based in all media, all digital media, it also brings us into the multimodality of writing in digital environments, and that's really important to us. So the way that I have found so far the book has been really helpful to me is the way Renee wrote it in two parts. I find that the developmental part of the book is real nice for helping me set the foundation for the class and to get students thinking. And I've really enjoyed two chapters in particular that I've really tapped into is chapters 1 and 4. And I'll tell you why, because of the reflections at the end have really had a powerful effect on students, the way students start thinking about being creators and makers and digital writers. I shared a document with Renee showing how students gave answers to this reflection on their identities as digital authors. I just today started copying in the raw data from students, looking at this activity, this critical thinking activity in analyzing mentor text. One of the other things I did with the students last semester in the live session was gave them the opportunity to read through the chapters beyond our projects, each group coming in and doing a teach-in on the chapter. And while each group did the teach-in, I used the Create to Learn website to go through the slides as they were talking. And that was powerful too, because it was validating them as they were talking. They were getting more and more excited as the slides were coming up about what they were talking about. And it was really a neat thing to watch, kind of, because I didn't really expect anything. So this is the data that just came in today on critically analyzing mentor text that I haven't started going through yet, but I'll be going through that. So where I am now is my goals moving forward is to try to get them to really, hopefully whatever gets created at the end of the semester to start uploading the best and the brightest to the Design Studio, and even trying to get that idea of Design Studio worked into my classroom, separate of the website, but that maybe on our own classroom website, we'll create Design Studio around that concept, and with the help of the book and the website, and then we will maybe transfer some of the best works over from there.
Over after work.
I don't know. That's kind of the overview of how I've been using it.
Hey Frank, I see you have a tab open. Can you show us where the slides are and help us understand? So students did a kind of they talked through the ideas of a chapter, and then
I will bring you something
them where the slides are.
Yeah. So if a studio is talking about if a student group was doing the teaching on video production,
I would recommend Annex.
I would go here to the slides. Oh, where are the slides? Am I on the right thing? Of course I'm not, because here we go.
Okay.
All right, digital audio and podcasting. So, and here are the slides. And each chapter has slides set up here that coincide with the chapter. So I would click through these slides while the students were presenting. And if I especially heard a concept that I had already clicked through, I'd go back to it. And again, it was a real strong visual to back them up, and also to show them that these were here so that they could go to them as well.
Cool. Thanks so much for sharing with us. Carolyn, can you talk a little bit about strategies you used with teaching your pre-service teachers?
Absolutely. Brian, may I share my screen?
Absolutely. Yep. Go right ahead.
Oh, moment, please. So I was working in a pre-service undergraduate environment. And I'm a strong believer in digital literacy as a means to help students get to the highest levels of Bloom's advanced taxonomy. And so what I wanted to do was see what they got out of the semester of learning by doing a Create to Learn project. We had a class blog, which I think you can see, and I gave them an overview. We call it a hot topic there, but we used the Create to Learn book. And so they had two parts to their responsibilities. The first part was to go through the process that is outlined in the Create to Learn book. Somebody's not muted and we're hearing you. I don't know if you realize that. Thank you.
Let me see if I can fix that.
The other part is the actual creation of the project. I did not have the students at the beginning of the semester buy the book. I didn't realize that was the direction I was going to go in, but I did have the entire website that was available. And so I went through the website and I broke it apart into the series of key questions that I believe Sait had outlined. And then I went through the chapters and gave them some keywords to consider as they were doing their work. So you can see there were 6 sections to the first part that I had them engage in, which was a process to get through to realize where they wanted to go with their project. In the pre-digital era, we might have called that creating a blueprint for your plan. So I went through as the students were working in class, and it was a 3-hour, once a week class. And I took observational notes down about what it was that they had questions about or how they were doing. There was a little confusion as whether the blog that they were doing the process on was actually a blog that they were required to do for their project. And of course, that was my error in not being clear enough. But the creative brief was a fascinating construction to watch. And some of the groups were so general in the way that they responded to these questions that I kicked back half the class for a redo, and they did it outside of class. They hadn't had much prior knowledge in being as specific as possible in their intention. Partially that's because it wasn't a writing class, it was an English class, right? So here is one of the process approaches that was completed, and I found that it was very successful. So they had come up with a blog, and each part of the blog is a piece of their process that they had to go through, whether it was creating, critically analyzing a mentor text, was their scope of work plan, or was their dream it, do it. And I have put in the chat, which if you click at the bottom of your Zoom, you'll see there's an icon that you can click the chat, and I put the link to all of these documents there if you ever want to look at it. But as you can see, they were students who already were facile with using digital text and tools, and they have all these animations and all, but they really went through each part and were very successful. Now, these are links to all of the students' final projects if you want to look at them. And I'm going to give you 2 samples, one of which I thought was a beautiful looking project. The second of which is a project that in close analysis told me that they learned a lot. So this was a blog that they created as their Create to Learn project that was to help educators put movement, kinesthetics, into their classrooms. And they created a Facebook page so that there would be opportunities to engage with the audience. So this is their Facebook page, and it's really very visually appealing. They have lots of different modalities that they're including. They have a lot of different text types. They've copied a lot of interesting information from the web into the Facebook page. That being said, I didn't see that they interpreted it, analyzed it well, or really made personal meaning with it. So I came away kind of unsure of what they learned. Now, this project I thought was probably not as slick, but what it is a Create to Learn project that I really thought went to the level of learning that I was seeking. And it was about stress management. As you can see, they have some of these memes that they're putting in that they obviously were very interested in, but the articles that they chose and the way that they interacted with the text, I thought were deeper levels of meaning making. And so I felt that of the 2 samples I'm showing you, one was more in tune with the commonly accepted conventions of the genre. The other one, this one, was more indicative of the learning that I was trying to see them reach at the end of the semester. The other thing that I wish I did differently was to require them to choose a modality that they had no previous experience with, like Screencastify. There were a lot of students who were immediately showing each other how to create a blog, and I wish I had done that a little differently. But of course, we don't know until we do it the first time. I think that's okay for a starting point.
Wow, Carolyn, that was absolutely fascinating.
I've got to stop sharing.
I'm going to take a minute and share my own experience teaching with the text. And then, Bridget, I'm hoping to hear a little bit more from you. Let me share my screen with you. As I mentioned, I taught a class called Digital Authorship. I'm teaching it again this semester. This is the first time I'm using the textbook. Of course, since this is a graduate course, since this is a graduate course, Create to Learn was just one of the many readings that we did. But the way the course is organized is that each week we take on a topic, and during the semester, students do 3 LEAP projects, which are media production projects, and each of those is accompanied with a reflection activity. They do some small skill building exercises. Sometimes that involves writing, other times that involves curating or annotating articles and, more scholarly writing. And then they're free to do a final paper project of their choice. Some students, especially if they're headed for a PhD, will write a research paper. Others will do a curriculum project or a creative project, and all of them create a Pedagogies, which is a 6-minute screencast, video screencast, 20 slides, 20 seconds. And we scaffold through that using the Create to Learn paradigm, right? Where they submit a creative brief and then a scope of work. They talk to a peer about their project. They submit a Pedagogies. One of the things that I was really excited about was that we did a collaborative project where students, remember, this is a fully online class. They never actually meet in a classroom face to face. And yet they were very successful in collaborating with a peer on a creative project. And one thing that because I'm working with graduate students, and most of these are all already classroom teachers, is that I could choose how to provide constraint to their creativity within thinking about the content, the format, the process, and then the distribution. One of the things I was really surprised about was the extent to which many of these teachers were really hadn't actually put themselves out there yet. So we did an activity with infographics, and each team member, each person had to create infographics to sort of represent their reading and learning. And you can see from the experience that we're reading some pretty scholarly work here, right? We're reading some serious academic articles, and we're using infographics as a means to synthesize. And so I was really pleased to see the way in which forcing students to explore how to synthesize ideas into an infographic form created a lot of creativity, and students responded, I think, really well to this assignment of creating an infographic as a way to scaffold their scholarly reading activity, right? So as you can see, they're all really different. They all do use templates, but they really demonstrate some powerful reading comprehension. To me, the most exciting thing about the experience so far has been their digital storytelling project, where they had to use either a podcast or a screencast to create a digital story in 6 minutes or 6 minutes or less. And I'm now just listening and watching all of these right now. So I haven't fully digested what patterns I notice, but what clearly teachers are reflecting deeply on is the way in which to be a digital author is to present a public identity. And so we've been kind of reading theoretically about identity, right? But now teachers really had to kind of own that for themselves, right? Now teachers really had to own the idea of identity for themselves and think about their own professional identity online. And so I think one of the learning experiences I've had in using the book is that teachers sometimes don't identify themselves as professional communicators. And so they haven't thought about the courage and the tenacity and the nature of the public identity. We've had some really rich conversations about the way in which there's a lot of fear about sharing a public identity, right? In some schools, teachers are discouraged from using social media or writing about their schoolwork. And I feel like this semester I've had a big learning curve around thinking about how one gradually acquires the confidence and the tenacity to present one's ideas using image, language, and sound. So that's kind of where I'm at in my teaching of this book. Bridget, I see that you're here, and I'd love to hear more about your experience with your teachers, and especially in the way you've integrated the activity that involves working in the elementary school too. Can you tell us more?
Sure. This has been incredibly helpful to hear from everyone about their various enactments and connections to the book. So the Create to Learn has been the core text, and in addition to other readings that we're now diving into as we get to the last kind of quarter of the course. But the reason that I focused on the Create to Learn text was because of the embedded workshop with children. You know, the class is 10 graduate students, and they're all practicing teachers. Most of them are elementary school teachers, and then I have a middle school teacher, and they're all young, but they were all, which was surprising to me. They were the way in which they're integrating technology into their classrooms is primarily through teaching content or generating excitement. And the ways in which kids get to make stuff and do stuff and create stuff, they were, other than kind of the usual things that you do, they said that they had been really fearful about doing that because I think they felt like they weren't quite sure how to do that. And they were fearful of things not going right and having a chaotic classroom. And so they viewed this embedded workshop as a low-risk environment. They said this is like a really low-risk way for us to first engage in it as learners and designers, and then to try things out with kids. So there are two things I'm going to highlight because I'm happy to share it with you all if you think it would be useful. One is I crafted reading guides for each chapter based on your slide decks and what was in your text. But I was focusing on specific aspects and things that I wanted them to do. And it's also where they would respond. So they would critique, you know, like the Dove versus Greenpeace video. They would critique those, and then they would find their own mentor text and critique. And then there would often be a question about application to their classrooms. In some cases, the audio, they did audio stories, which were so incredibly powerful as one of their response activities. And Renee, it would be great to have a follow-up conversation, maybe when we see each other at ILA. But the way in which we were working with children was I had different kinds of multimodal compositions that I had done previously with kids. And so they started off creating an avatar using the Design Your Wild Self from the New York Zoo and Aquarium. And then they did, with a partner, multimodal shoe poems as a collaborative activity and as get to know you. And the teachers would do these the week before in our session, and then they would try it out. And for the first several sessions, I led the workshop with kids, and then the teachers were just coaches working with, we had usually 15 or 16 children. And then we moved. I've been doing some work with tactile picture book making using, as part of an NSF project, using both craft and 3D printing. But with this group, we had them craft a retelling of a fable and then enhance it with sound using makey tools, and also to add braille using a brailler text. So they were learning about how do you design for inclusion and how do you design using different modes. And then the most recently, actually tomorrow they're going to be doing a digital video news event with kids with greencasting, which we haven't done as teachers. I do find that it's different when we haven't experienced it as a team.
Right.
And they're trying to learn about it the way that you typically would by, consulting resources and, reading the chapter in your book that's related, and then looking at some examples. But I'm seeing how there's a difference in depth in those two different kind of ways of doing this work.
So when they get to be learners themselves and they're guided by you or by a group through the experience themselves as learners, then you're observing that the following week when they support the children, that the quality of the instruction, the quality of the work is better?
I think well, typically it is when it's digital. When they did the tactile picture books, that they didn't create their own in advance, but they had seen examples that I'd used in another project. But when it's digital, I can see how there's a difference in the level of kind of sophistication in the scaffolding. Although overall, they've been doing a fabulous job because they took over. As I said, I did about maybe the first 6 workshops with kids, took the lead role, and then they worked with 1 or 2 other classmates to lead a session. And I think given the constraints of the sessions, because they had to create a digital video poster about internet safety and digital citizenship. And last week I was traveling, but they worked with a startup called Spectrums, where you wear a ring and it's an iPad app and you tap to compose, and it's color coded to your illustration. And so we did have a workshop there and they were able to do that with students. So I'm really eager to see what happened. But overall, the idea of embedding the workshop within the graduate class, I love it. They're so thoughtful. Because we don't have as much time, right, for discussion, I am relying on the reading guide and their responses within the reading guide as a way of seeing how they're thinking about things with much less time for discussion in class, because they want to debrief, which right, of course is important. And then we have to have a short planning for the next session. But it seems like I taught digital literacies last spring, and this seems to be a much more powerful experience. And it's also, the children we're working with are just amazing. They're coming in, late in the day at 4:30 after they've already gone home, and they've come back, and they're just like, they throw themselves into, and we did stop motion animation. So all of these things, it's like 1-hour workshops with the kids. And so we hit the ground running, and you wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have a coach for every 2 children. But the coaches definitely, they intuitively knew that they were there to support and scaffold, but they weren't teaching kids like how to do it step by step. It was not that kind of activity. Nice. But we had a general model of, this is it, here's some examples, and now work with the materials and tools, and your coach is there to help you. So they've been just fabulous in that regard, that they haven't gotten scared and wanted to show kids how to do everything, but we're willing to kind of problem solve with them but also sometimes co-design with them, because that can be very productive when you've got a short time. So I'm going to stop there, but I'll have more to share at the end of the semester.
Wow. Wow. That was fascinating. So we've now had 4 brief presentations from folks who are using the Create to Learn, a book or the Create to Learn pedagogies. Now it's time for comments, questions, and discussion. So who wants to go first? Looks like we have some new members. Welcome. Ada, Andrea, Wei Min, Lucia.
I have a question for Jody. Jody, if I could ask.
Sure.
So because I've observed your classroom and I was a part of the kind of, early stages of that classroom with you and Tom, and I love what you both do. My question is, how do you envision Create to Learn becoming part of that process of creating that you're doing in that classroom, and in the field of writing that you're preparing them for?
Well, I'd love to be able to give a really good answer to that question, Frank. This is actually my first exposure to Create to Learn. I had seen the invitation to the webinar back in January, and it sounded like something that might be able to be used in our classroom. I think that in terms of, I think the common link is storytelling, because certainly we teach that in the proposal class, that this isn't just a document that's responding to an RFP. You have to tell a story, and it has to be compelling, and it has to speak to your audience, and not just about you. And I would love to get through the book and look at the website, and I know that there will be some things that we can incorporate next semester.
Oh, you know what, a really great observation, Jody. You know that one of the things that the book kind of features around the topic of storytelling is about how to structure the way conflict works in storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so one intermediate assignment I had as students were working on their digital storytelling is we looked at a 4-minute clip produced by Pixar about conflict in cartoons, right? In Finding Nemo and in WALL-E, and the students' writing assignment that week was, how are you structuring your narrative so that there is a conflict and obviously then resolution? And for many of the teachers, they actually said stuff like, well, we've kind of been taught to like avoid conflict and not to include conflict in story. That requires being vulnerable, right? And so we had this really great conversation about how in storytelling it is the conflict that creates the feelings of connectedness to the story and to the process of identification. And they all built conflict rather beautifully into their narrative. So I do think that thinking about storytelling is definitely part of this book, and it's not something that, I mean, most of my students are teachers. They probably haven't had a creative writing class. They probably haven't done narrative writing in a very long time. And so to see how they were able to incorporate those elements of narrative, I think was a powerful experience for them. You know, it made them feel like they were crafting, right? They were crafting a story.
Yep, and that's what the students do in our class, and you know, there are so many different elements to it. But I definitely have heard some freaking amazing things today, and I'm glad I tuned in, because I think there's definitely something we can do here.
Cool. Let's see if anybody else has any other comments or questions. How are you involving students in creating media as a way to explore digital and media literacy? What questions or concerns do you have as you think about your students as digital authors? Carolyn, oh, go ahead, Frank.
Okay, I can respond to that from the reflection activity at the end of chapter 1 that I shared with you, Renee, at the beginning of the semester, that I was very surprised, I think, as you were, that students really responded to the idea of having a public presence online, a digital presence, as threatening. I was really surprised at that. But then as I started reflecting on that, at the beginning of the semester, I asked them to give me their definition of digital literacy and their introduction of themselves. And I have them do it on 3 platforms. The Etherpad, that you know I love, which is text only, and then the Flipgrid, and then our Twitter hashtag. And I always get 100% Etherpad. I never get 100% on the other 2. So there's something to be said about that. So they really don't want to feel vulnerable. They don't like, they have some fear.
Right. And I think it's a process of working through that process. Carolyn, I wanted to ask you a question. I thought you raised a really interesting thing in your presentation about this dynamic between form and content, between superficial, pretty work and work that you thought was more thoughtful. In both cases, it sounded like the students were curating content, right? Making choices and deciding how to present them. I wonder, I've been a little bit, I don't know, concern is quite the right word, but I've been a little bit curious about the role of templates in supporting students' creative work, because of course it's easy to make stuff look pretty these days.
Well, to answer your question, Renee, years ago, when I was first starting my interest in digital and media literacy, I was telling the leader of my book group what I was doing, and he related a story of his grandson who was in 5th grade and who was doing a research project, and all the boy did was take things from the web and put them on a site. And the grandfather, my friend, never thought that the child accommodated any of the learning. And that's always been an instructive idea in the back of my head. So for me, I do always require multimodal composition. Students, I feel, need to compose in these ways, as it's the 21st century literacy. And if we're going to compose for real audiences, it has to be multimodal. So digital, audio, visual, video, and print are always required in my classes. That being said, I like, say, the PictoChart templates because it gives students an ease into trying this. So this semester, I had some of the same students from the fall, so I couldn't try the Create to Learn again because they would have been bored, right? So instead, I did the backdoor approach, and I required different assignments to be done through different modalities. And I made them do a lesson plan on a PictoChart, which is an infographic, in case somebody out there doesn't know. And they struggled at first, and then when they got the technical hang of it, their lesson plans were so visually appealing, but also really in depth. And I think it gave them the confidence to say, I can produce digital compositions that will speak to the students, and yet will also have that depth of knowledge and meaning that they're looking for. So I like the templates. I don't think they're an end, but I think they're a fine beginning point.
Mm-hmm. In some ways, I think in a way you and Bridget have a really interesting, there's some really interesting, like some nuance there. You're both teaching teachers, and you're both using activities that you hope will transfer, right, from the context of their work as a learner in your class,
yes, absolutely,
to their work as a teacher in your class. With Bridget, her students are seeing, I think what it seems to me is like kind of a near transfer, right? Because they're literally doing something as a learner, and then the next week they're getting to be the teacher. What's your perception, Carolyn, of the relationship between your expectations for your students as learners and then your hopes for them as teachers? How do you see that, the relationship between those two phases?
Well, it's fascinating because they are involved in a college atmosphere, which a lot of the degrees of demonstrated success are, tell me that you know what I told you. And this is not what that is. That's only the beginning point. This is, okay, you understand the concept. Now, how are you going to present it for an audience? And that's that heuristic part of it. That's that meaning making that I find so fascinating. And often, not often, sometimes the default is, Frank, to that print text that they have such comfort and familiarity with because it's the way they can best present their ideas. It doesn't mean that's the best modality to present the ideas for this next generation. And so I do a lot of mastery learning. You know, you're onto it, you have a good start. Would you like a chance to revise and improve your grade? And they will often take me up on it. I grade about 150%. About half of my students redo once they get a sense of, are they reaching the audience? Have they accomplished the objectives? Are they really making that transference of concepts to another audience? It's a very different approach than just teaching the students. I'm teaching the students to teach other students.
And because the course is called Teaching the Young Adolescent, they're all future middle school teachers, is that right?
Yes. Rhode Island does not have a student teaching opportunity for these pre-service teachers. They want to teach middle school, so they give this strand at Rhode Island College so they can show that they've had a demonstrated interest, and they take a variety of courses. This is one of them. This was their first ever real teaching opportunity.
Cool. And Bridget, how does that compare to the context that you work in? And then Frank, how does that compare to the context that you work in? Because it seems like people are using the book in different kind of contexts with different kinds of learners.
Right. Well, I think I want to say something about the use of templates, because I actually have found templates can be a valuable scaffold. But so some support is useful, too much support is not, because what we don't want is the digital equivalent of, 30 snowmen with orange carrot noses and black hats. So connected to template for me is the importance of examples. And I try to always have at least 2, but sometimes 3 examples that are quite different, and I vary it intentionally in relation to what might appear to be complexity, and also in the use of modes, so that I'm trying to offer multiple entry points into this design experience. And so the template is there as a beginning kind of way into something, but the goal is always to move beyond that template. And it could be within the particular genre that you're working with, or it could be that oftentimes we'll do a group experience. Like that multimodal shoe poem, there were 3 different little models for how you could do that: a shoe conversation, or a shoe monologue, or a shoe memory, and they could choose. But that was just because it was an early experience. In other kinds of things, like if they're doing retellings, the initial experience might be in the tactile picture book. The whole group chooses 1 page out of a book. So you've constrained the task so that they can really focus on the tactile expression. And then they move to creating their own tactile retelling, where the template is not there anymore, but they've had the experience of, okay, what is it I'm trying to express? How am I using the different modes to express that? And how am I working as a team? So I totally, it's like the way that I also really struggle with rubrics, because I think they restrict people and constrain people, particularly in a multimodal context. But I think that's a challenge, because oftentimes people move to the template, which is a productive way in, but they never move beyond the template.
Right. I am absolutely fascinated by that idea. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why when we created the Create to Learn website, we made it be so that you can establish an account on the website and you or your students can submit examples of student work. So if you go to the Create to Learn website, that's createtolearn.online, and you click on the tab here that says examples of student created work. There's lots of examples of student created work on topics like a video on coastal erosion, body language and the male gaze, stuff on propaganda, philosophy of education, Renaissance English history podcast. And I do think it's really interesting to think about how and whether supporting students learning through providing, like you said, diverse models might be a creative alternative to the somewhat deadening or creativity crushing rubric.
Right.
I'm intrigued about that idea, and I hope that you consider, if you're on this call, considering uploading or inviting your students to upload to this section, because it can be very powerful for students to see examples that help them understand the nature of the assignment, but also free their mind. Okay.
You know, I'm wondering, Renee, as people are contributing to the examples, is there a way to organize or structure so that you can search on different things? Or I'm just thinking the more, you know, as this grows and as you have more wonderful examples, I mean, I see you've got a keyword there. I wonder what your categories are. I wonder even if it could be tagged with a connection to the particular assignment or chapter or.
Cool idea. I didn't ever think of making the category system to the chapter. That is a really cool idea. But of course there is to the type of content, right?
Oh, okay.
So data visualization or remix production. One of the things that's pretty exciting is that you can enroll as an instructor and then your students can follow you. I think we're going to try to do a video tutorial on this summer, and maybe in the fall launch a kind of how to use this website as an instructor with students. We ourselves haven't quite figured out that part out yet. So we're learning as we go. But we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure everybody who wants to contribute has had a chance to talk. How are you using Create to Learn pedagogies with your learners? Jen?
I had not yet started, so this is why I'm being inspired. So I'm sitting and I'm soaking it all in from my house and in my car and everywhere else I'm sitting as I'm leaving and starting and stopping and starting and stopping today. But getting the ideas from you guys has been really helpful. So it's just that when I first was introduced to the book, I know it was really in the context of the university. And I'm really inspired today to hear some ideas of using this with younger students. So I think that's just the push that I needed to start forward on my own journey with my kids.
Cool. I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Before I turn it back to Brian, I just wanted to make a little bit of announcement, because we have another webinar coming up, and I wanted to just take a minute and share my screen with you and talk to you a little bit about what's coming up for the rest of the spring, because we go straight through till May with the Media Education Lab webinars. What's coming up next is a webinar on Monday, April 23rd. It's a webinar that's like a trial run for our conference presentation. We're going to the International Communication Association in Prague. And we're going to be talking about media literacy with marginalized communities. And so the international team that's presenting on that project, we're going to kind of do a run through of our talk. as a webinar. In case you're not going to the International Communication Association, you can get the talk for free there. After that, we're doing a webinar on April 30th called Policy, Standards, and Assessment in the Personalized Learning Era. That's featuring Rob Greco, who is the Director of Curriculum for the Wyndham Supervisory Union up in Vermont. He's been thinking a lot about media literacy in relation to the personalized learning era, and he's going to share. And then we finish our spring semester with a really wonderful webinar, a visit from Ellen Reynolds, who's a Philadelphia-based educator and filmmaker who's going to be talking about making documentaries for and with children. So way cool stuff happening this semester. So happy to share a little bit about that. Okay, Brian, I turn it back to you to offer some conclusions and close. And
okay, well, I think it's been a great discussion of Create to Learn, and I loved listening to how people have been using it, and I can't wait to actually dig into the book myself and bring it down to elementary level. Want to thank Frank and Carolyn for leading the discussion and everybody else who contributed, and hopefully we'll see a lot of the same folks at the next webinar.
Cool. All right, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks,
welcome.
Carolyn. Thanks, Bridget.